By 1994, Disney was officially back on top thanks to the success of its recent animated releases. The Lion King would be the highest grossing animated film of all time. Disney, however, was thinking bigger. After the company's major deal with Pixar in 1991 and inviting John Lasseter back to work with his old comrades, Lasseter did not hesitate as he went right to work on a brand new film unlike the animated world had ever seen before. Lasseter already had seen capabilities of computer animation, and after creating award-winning shorts for Pixar, the very first full-length animated film would become a reality. Based on one of the previous Pixar short films, 1998's Tin Toy, a story would be developed about two toys fighting to win the heart of the boy who owned them. After many names getting tossed around, it would be Toy Story that would be the official name of the film. Toy Story would see many challenges before it would see the big screen, and most of it would be thanks to constant disagreements between John Lasseter and the current head of the Disney Animation Studios, Jeffrey Katzenberg. In early screen tests, Pixar impressed Disney with the technical innovation, but convincing Disney of the plot would be more difficult. At each presentation by Pixar, Katzenberg would tear much of it up, saying that it was not going in the right direction. Katzenberg's big push was to add more edginess to the main characters, and also for the film to have family appeal and not just be an attraction for children. The main character for the film was a cowboy doll named Woody, and thanks to the direction of Katzenberg, he came off as a very dislikable character. Even the voice of Woody, recent Academy Award winner Tom Hanks, felt that Woody came off as a massive jerk and not a hero. When it was time for the first half of the film to be presented to the Disney executives, the results were disastrous. Katzenberg wanted an answer as to why it was told to him that he was the problem, and that he was not letting Lasseter and the rest of Pixar make the movie that they wanted. At this point, the studio was seriously considering scrapping the film entirely, but Lasseter's promise to the Disney studio that if given one more chance, said that his Pixar team would give them a truly wonderful film. The Pixar team came back with a new script 3 months later, with the character Woody morphed from being a tyrannical boss of Andy's toys to being their wise and caring leader. The other main character, the spaceman named Buzz Lightyear, was a character that was also changed slightly to make it more clear that the audience would realize that he didn't know that he was a toy. In February 1994, the film was put back into production, and by 1995, Pixar had gone through many trials and errors to bring Toy Story to the movie screen. With an all-star cast of Tom Hanks, Tim Allen, and John Ratzenberger, among others, a truly wonderful film was slowly coming together. At this point in time, Disney saw the release of its 33rd classic, Pocahontas, and the box office results were not as strong as the previous releases from what is now known as the Disney Renaissance period. On Thanksgiving weekend in 1995, Toy Story would open in theaters around the world and would be the top-grossing film of the holiday weekend. Toy Story went on to earn over $361 million worldwide. The critics put out rave reviews left and right, praising the film for both the animation's technical innovation and the screenplay's wit and sophistication. Some critics even considered it to be one of the greatest animated films ever made. The film received 3 Academy Award nominations, including Best Original Screenplay, Best Original Score, and Best Original Song for You Got a Friend in Me, composed by Randy Newman, as well as an award for Special Achievement. The marketing for the film went into a frenzy. Everything from clothing to toys, Pixar had become a household name overnight. Lasseter and his team had done it. The very first CGI film was a sensation. At this point, Pixar knew with its monster being let out of its cage, there was no time for celebration, as it was time to get to work on the next film. Even before the release of Toy Story, Pixar had already begun turning their thoughts towards the next CGI film. During the summer of 1994, John Lasseter and his fellow Pixar elites sat down for a lunch. During that lunch, John Lasseter and the rest of the Pixar studio heads started churning out idea after idea after idea. But the first one that they wanted to bring to the screen was a story about insects. The new film, titled A Bug's Life, had already been drawn to the idea of insects as characters, because they were very simple things to be put into computer animation. Andrew Stanton and Joe Ranft recalled an old project of Walt Disney's in 1934 called The Grasshopper and the Ant. In addition, Walt Disney Animation Studios had considered producing a film in the late 1980s entitled Army Ants that centered around a pacifist ant living in a militaristic colony which never fully materialized. In the summer of 1995, they decided that this would be the idea for the second Pixar film. They pitched it to the current CEO of Disney, Michael Eisner. Eisner thought that the idea was fine, as it would be the second film to go under the original 1991 agreement between both of the companies. Production was going to be more difficult for Bug's Life rather than Toy Story, as the computers ran sluggishly due to the complexity of the character model. Concepts that Lasseter wanted to use for the film included point-of-view shots and realistic-looking plant life, as well as how the insects would interact with each other, making them very close to their actual natural state. They would have to be forced to use more advanced technology in order to make the film work. The new film would also focus on more than just two characters. Like Woody and Buzz in Toy Story, they would include more characters which would have more screen time, and more characters that would be given even more depth and development. The character design also presented a new challenge, in that the designers would have to make the ants appear likable. Although the art department and animators studied insects closely, natural realism would give way for the film's larger needs. Teams took out the mandibles and decided to make the ants stand upright and replace their 6 normal legs with just 2 arms and 2 legs. The grasshoppers, in contrast, would receive a pair of extra appendages to appear less attractive as being the enemies of the heroes. The story's scale also required software engineers to accommodate new demands. Among these were to be able to handle shots of crowds of ants. Pixar worked out the practical problems that kept it working in animation. Studio would also test out some of their new techniques with a short film called Jerry's Game that was planned to be attached alongside A Bug's Life in its theatrical release. Suddenly, a new movie would hit theaters, but it wouldn't be A Bug's Life from Disney. Between the release of the 2 Pixar films, Jeffrey Katzenberg would leave Disney and team up with Steven Spielberg and David Geffen to create DreamWorks. Their mission was to rival Disney, and after DreamWorks' acquisition of Pacific Data Images, their first project would be a film none other than about the very same insects, and it would be known as the CGI film from DreamWorks, Ants. Both films were very similar in terms of main characters and their goals. Ants, however, had a better look, more complex plot, as well as a star-studded cast including Woody Allen to Sylvester Stallone. Lasseter believed that the idea was stolen by Katzenberg, and even contacted him directly, to which he admitted that it was the truth. Distraught, Ants would still hit theaters in the summer of 1998, and A Bug's Life would be released that very same year in time for the holiday season. Both films would have successful box office results, but even with 2 successful films under Pixar's belt, these wounds would be the hardest to heal. After the dust had settled over the controversy of A Bug's Life, Pixar felt that it was time to go back to something familiar. With the success of Toy Story, a sequel was in the minds of the Pixar staff a month after the first film's opening. Lasseter was traveling with his family and found a young boy clutching a Woody doll at an airport. Lasseter described the boy's excitement and showed how it really touched him deeply as a father. Lasseter realized that his character no longer belonged to him only, but rather it belonged to others as well. The memory was a defining factor in the production of Toy Story 2, with Lasseter moving to create another great film based on that child's enthusiasm for the characters, as well as for everyone else who loved the original. The idea of a sequel was embraced from the get-go, but it was originally planned as a direct-to-video release. Along with Disney animation releases hitting theaters, Disney had recently begun making direct-to-video sequels, based on their successful features. The sequel to Aladdin, The Return of Jafar, had returned an estimate of $100 million in profit. So having Toy Story join these ranks was probably the way to go. Initially, everything regarding the sequel was uncertain. Whether stars Tom Hanks and Tim Allen would be available and affordable, what was the story's premise going to be, and even whether the film was going to be computer animated or not. In the early days of production, when the reels were proving promising, Disney upgraded the film to a theatrical release, but Pixar was very unhappy with the film's quality. Lasseter and the story team redeveloped the entire plot in one weekend. Although most Pixar features take years to develop, the established release date could not be moved and the production schedule of Toy Story 2 was compressed into 9 months. Despite production struggles, luck was on Pixar's side. They managed to get the original cast back as well as some newcomers including Joan Cusack, Wayne Knight, and Kelsey Grammer. Toy Story 2 opened on November 1999 to a wildly successful box office number, eventually grossing over $485 million and received universal acclaim from critics. Toy Story 2 had even been considered to be one of the few sequels to outshine the original, and it continues to be featured frequently on lists of the greatest animated films ever made. It has even received an Academy Award nomination for Best Song. It was clear that Pixar was on the top of its game. Now with 3 successful films, it was time to invest in some more serious production of new stories, and the results would end up being some of the greatest animated films of all time.
When somebody loved me.
Disney was riding high on Pixar's success, and their deal clearly had paid off. Even though the original contract had Pixar working on 3 films, Disney wanted Pixar to stick around for a while and work on some more projects for them. It would not come easy, as Pixar complained that the current arrangement was not equitable. Pixar was responsible for the creation and production, while Disney handled the marketing and distribution. Profits and production costs were split 50-50, but Disney exclusively owned all the stories and sequel rights. At this time, Disney had even created a Saturday morning cartoon called Buzz Lightyear of Star Command, and the Pixar character ended up being as popular as ever. The Pixar men would then go back to the ideas from the 1994 lunch and started working on their next project about monsters. Pete Docter went back to the days of childhood, reminding himself of the monsters in the closet. He would then go on to be the director of the 2001 Pixar film Monsters Incorporated. After many different ideas, the story would end up being a tale of 2 monster buddies who lived in a whole alternate dimension from our world and using children's closets as portals in order to collect their screams and power the city. The 2 monsters would be voiced by Billy Crystal and John Goodman. Once again, this new Pixar film would go through more technological advances in CGI imagery. Pixar set up a simulation department and created a new fur simulation called FITS, short for Physics Tool. FITS would allow fur to react in natural ways. When a character in one case named Sully would move, his fur would automatically react to his movements, taking into account to the effects of wind and gravity as well. The FITS program also controlled movement on clothing, which provided another breakthrough. Monsters, Inc. ranked number 1 at the box office in its opening weekend, grossing $62,577,000 in North America. In its 3rd weekend, the film experienced a larger decline of 50%, placing itself in 2nd position just after Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. In its 4th weekend, however, there was an increase of 5.9%, making an additional $24 million that weekend, combining for a total of over $525 million. As of May 2013, this film is the 8th biggest 4th weekend for any film. Monsters Incorporated would go on to make more history, as it would be one of the first 3 films to be nominated for a new Oscar at the Academy Awards, the Oscar for Best Animated Feature. While the first Oscar of this category would go to the DreamWorks Disney-bashing comedy Shrek, Pixar would continue to crank out the hits. The next Pixar film would literally be a fish-out-of-water story. Andrew Stanton was a child who loved going to the dentist to see the fish tank. Assuming that the fish were from the ocean and wanted to go home, it would become 2003's landmark Pixar film, Finding Nemo. To make this film would require a lot of research to ensure that the movements of the fish in the film were believable. Animators took a crash course in fish biology and oceanography. They visited aquariums, received in-house lectures from ichthyologists, and took real scuba lessons to study the coral reef. The film would also allow an actress who had stepped out of the spotlight to return in a big way. Stanton was inspired to cast Ellen DeGeneres, as he watched an episode of Ellen in which he saw her change the subject 5 times before finishing one sentence. Along with Albert Brooks, Willem Dafoe, and Jeffrey Rush, the film was ready to roll. Finding Nemo would receive universal acclaim, earning over $380 million in North America and over $500 million worldwide, for a total of almost $1 billion. It became the 2nd highest grossing film of 2003, behind The Lord of the Rings: The Return of the King, and it would stand as the highest grossing Pixar film for years years to come. Pixar was still going strong, even in the midst of competition from DreamWorks and contract negotiations with Disney. That wouldn't stop this dream team of story writers and animators to continue to produce additional award-winning films. The success of Finding Nemo would now show the world just how far CGI animation could go. One of the Pixar writer-creators felt otherwise. He believed that it was time to show the world of animation something truly incredible.